To first understand how Nintendo went from making one of the highest selling consoles of all time to losing over $200 million the year the Wii U released, we first have to understand what made its predecessor, the Wii, so successful in the first place. Nintendo wasn't in the greatest spot before the Wii was released. Unfortunately, the Nintendo GameCube still only managed to sell a total of 21 million units in its entire lifespan. To give you an idea of how bad this is, the following console, the Nintendo Wii, sold 20 million units in its first year by comparison, and a grand total of well over 100 million units by the end of its lifespan. So what did the Wii do differently that made it such a huge success? I want to go over a few different aspects of the console so we can get an idea of how Nintendo made one of the most innovative and impactful consoles ever made.
We would like to play.
Kirby's not just yawn. He's a tank.
The first aspect I want to go over is that the Wii had mass appeal. To people who've been playing video games for a long time or have played enough to understand basic layouts of a normal video game controller, using them is mostly second nature, especially for people who play fighting games or play competitive video games in general that utilize muscle memory for efficiency in their own play. After the GameCube released, Nintendo wanted to find a way to compete with the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox, and wanted to essentially do the exact opposite of what the GameCube did in its design. Above all else, the GameCube was a console designed for their core audience of gamers, and Nintendo decided that they didn't want to compete on hardware power and instead decided to conceptualize a new way to play video games. Okay, so I was in the middle of researching this video for the script, and I'm on the wiki page for the Wii, and this is a real sentence in the wiki page for this, by the way. Satoru Iwata said that he recognized that Nintendo had not been keeping up with trends in the video game industry, such as adapting to online gaming. If you're a Nintendo fan, then you know that all these years later, in the year 2022, and Nintendo still hasn't been keeping up with trends in the video game industry, such as adapting to online gaming. It still sucks all these years later. Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of tons of heavy hitters in Nintendo's library, was notably inspired by Dance Dance Revolution's unique usage of motion controls in gameplay during the development of their next home console. This, of course, resulted in arguably the biggest factor in determining the reasoning behind the Wii's success, and that is the usage of motion controls and the design of the Wiimote itself. The buttons are perfectly placed where your fingers are resting, so you don't have to go out of your way to locate any buttons, which makes a big difference for people who don't play video games. I don't know if you've ever watched someone who doesn't play video games attempt to play video games, but I've seen usually a lot of their trouble comes in trying to remember where the buttons are, in combination with using their hand-eye coordination in a way that isn't natural to them. Wii Sports is a perfect example of Nintendo taking full advantage of the design of the Wiimote itself. The brilliance in Wii Sports is in emulating actions that the majority of people are already very familiar with: swinging a baseball bat, bowling, swinging a tennis racket, etc. Those are all motions that people already have familiarity with, and this makes it very easy to understand for people of almost any age. Not to mention, the motion controls itself were pretty solid at the time, and other companies had a very difficult time attempting to replicate its formula in a way that was anywhere nearly as successful as the Wii. The Wiimote also emulates the shape of a normal TV controller at the time, and they made it so that the Wii comes with a sensor that you place anywhere around the TV, forcing users to navigate the console by pointing the controller at the TV and clicking what they want to do, just as they would watching TV normally, which I gotta say is a brilliant design choice by them. Good job, Nintendo, you did good. It's not just the controller either. Almost every design choice that was made in building the Wii was made with the customer's convenience in mind. For example, Iwata said that he wanted it to be capable of playing past Nintendo games in order to eliminate clutter in houses. Not to mention, the Wii and the Wiimote themselves were both rather small and thin, and they were made so that they can fit almost anywhere, which makes it easy to transport and move as you see fit, which makes its overall accessibility that much greater. The second aspect I feel was a big contributing factor to the commercial success of the Wii was the marketing. The Wii was being marketed as this revolutionary piece of technology that made gaming easy and accessible for everyone. Even when you watch the commercials from back in the day, it's very clear there's no specific demographic being targeted. You'll see anyone from young kids to older adults all playing together in these commercials, and that's a pretty major factor in marketing. If you want to appeal to basically everybody, then you're going to need a concept that is very easily understandable and applicable to everyone, and you're going to have to show people of all ages enjoying their time with the console, and that's exactly what most commercials for the Wii do. Just a quick side note, I really missed the early 2000s era of video game commercials. I literally have 2 compilation videos of that exact era of game commercials, because companies back then were just so much braver and willing to take risks to stand out, and it was basically a competition between all the companies to see who could make the craziest marketing strategies for their newest software, and it made the commercials so much fun to watch. Look, I just want to see video game commercials get weird and fun again the way they used to be back in the day. The physical design of the Wii itself was also pretty slick and futuristic looking at the time, and that also bled into the revolutionary piece of technology vibe they were going for with the Wii, and the overall aesthetic was very simple and straightforward in a very Apple type of way, if you know what I mean. And generally speaking, as a common rule of thumb, if you want to appeal to as many people as possible, then you gotta keep it simple, stupid. So much so that tons of companies have gone out of their way to simplify their logos and marketing to varying degrees of success, unfortunately. Nintendo found a perfect balance of simplicity while still managing to stand out with their brand of being the biggest innovator when it came to gaming. It does also help that the early 2000s was a very different time where gimmicks like motion controls were seen much more positively instead of a cheap novelty, and again, it also helps that the gimmick of motion controls was very good and functional for its time. The last thing I feel was pretty significant in determining the success of the Wii was the fact that the supply of the Wii was very short, and therefore the demand for the consoles was extremely high on launch. People went months and months without being able to buy a Wii after all of the hype surrounding it. I mean, they flew off of store shelves like crazy, and people rarely, if ever, had a chance to even attempt to buy one. Wait a minute. Why does this sound so familiar? But yeah, the demand for this console was extremely high, and that also helped build anticipation for people who may have not had any interest initially in the console before. Us humans are a very selfish species, and we always simply want what we cannot have. At the end of the day, if the brand new shiny thing isn't easily accessible, then people are going to go out of their way to put more effort into trying to get that thing, and I'm sorry, but I am coming down with a mean case of deja vu. You guys have no idea how hard I hunted for a PS5. The Wii is just one of Nintendo's best examples of Nintendo taking their wildest, riskiest ideas in the name of shaking up the gaming landscape, no matter how left field it is. And that is why the Wii solidified Nintendo as the king of left field in my eyes. However, this doesn't mean all of their ideas are going to hit quite in the same way the Wii or the Nintendo DS did. Now, if you've watched this video from me, also, wow, I can't believe it's been almost 2 years since I uploaded this video. Thank you all for watching it. I never expected it to be my biggest video ever. I said this in that video. Nintendo was on the verge of releasing a console that would surpass the sales of the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 combined. For all intents and purposes, the Wii is Nintendo at their peak, and the console perfectly outlines a common factor that all of Nintendo's highest selling consoles have in common. The Nintendo DS, the Game Boy Color, and the Wii are currently the highest selling consoles in Nintendo's history, and in my opinion, it's all for one reason: innovation. But even 2 years ago, my point was so poignant and accurate that the developers of the Wii themselves literally had the exact same thought process as me. I think these quotes from the wiki page of the Wii outline the problems with the Wii U's design and why it failed. It says, quote, "He also thought that video gaming had become too exclusive and wanted Nintendo to pursue gaming hardware and software that would appeal to all demographics. Nintendo's market analysis found that their focus on novel hardware had created consoles that made it difficult for third-party developers to create games for, hampering their position." The second quote suggests that the Nintendo DS actually influenced the original design for the Wii, and that they wanted to replicate the two-screen interface with the touchscreen, and they even came up with a prototype for it. In the end, though, it got rejected because they felt the systems would be too similar to each other, and that their new home console should have its own identity instead. Anyways, the point of me bringing this up is that this, alongside almost everything I mentioned, and lots of other mistakes, is what eventually caused Nintendo their $200 million loss the year the Wii U launched. One of the biggest mistakes Nintendo made in making the Wii U is the name of the console itself, the Wii U. I can understand why they'd name it the Wii U considering how the Wii did extremely well. It makes sense that they'd want their next console to be associated with that past success, since it would, in theory, have a similar level of success due to the expectations built up by the success of the Wii. The problem with this is that the Wii U's functionality is entirely different in every way to its predecessor, so that affiliation just made it more confusing to the consumer and basically everyone else. A good example of doing this correctly would be literally anyone else. When you look at either the PlayStation or Xbox line of consoles, it's very obvious to the consumer just by looking at it that they are supposed to be related. The controllers and design of the consoles themselves have stayed similar enough to the point where it makes it obvious to the consumer that this is in fact the next console in this family of consoles. But if you make the Wii U like a weirdo iPad after associating it with the Wii, which was controlled by a remote motion controller, then it just makes it confusing. I remember hearing when they first revealed the Wii U at E3 that people were actually confused as to what the Wii U was supposed to be. So much so that when they actually revealed it, the applause was just completely scattered and quiet.
You might remember how the Wii name began to make perfect sense once you started hearing it as Wii.
No.
Welcome to the world of Wii U.
All the audience were confused, like, what is this supposed to be? We don't know. I mean, if I didn't know any better, then I'd probably just assume it was like a weird upgrade to the original Wii instead of its own console. I feel like it would have made much more sense to have named the Wii U something entirely different so that it's clear to everyone that this is something entirely new and different to the last console. I think this way there's less confusion about what the console actually is, and they can make more of an informed decision about their purchase. However, this is only the beginning of the Wii U's issues, as this next problem is maybe the biggest problem with the console itself, or at least the hardware anyways. Honestly, I don't think the concept of the Wii U was all that bad, but it certainly wasn't as revolutionary as the motion controls that were still trying to be replicated by other companies after the Wii U released either. I understand that smart devices were beginning to hit their big stride around this time period. However, I'm not entirely sure if Nintendo thought enough about how this may affect the experience of their past customers who have already gotten so comfortable with the Wii and were potentially looking for something similarly intuitive, and this is where the association with the Wii once again does this console no favors. Again, one of the biggest strengths of the Wii was that it was simple, intuitive, and very easy to understand by anyone. But I can't, for the life of me, envision my fucking grandma playing Wii Sports U or whatever on this weird tablet thing. The concept of the Wii U's tablet simply does not have the same level of marketability that the Wii had. For the average gamer, using the tablet was probably simple enough, and all things considered, I still enjoyed my time with the Wii U just fine before I sold it in high school for like $60. Look. In my defense, the Switch already had basically all of the killer apps that the Wii U had, and it was a better console, so really there was no point in me having it. But that still doesn't mean that most people are going to be as interested in something like the Wii U in comparison to someone like a gamer probably would be. I would normally say that it doesn't matter how weird a gimmick is as long as it's executed properly, and I still fully agree with that statement, but the Wii U is an odd exception in this case. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest reasons the Wii was so simple to understand is because Wii Sports and other titles capitalized on using motions that everyone is already accustomed to doing in real life, and the Wii U simply does not have that same level of familiarity. The real underlying factor in this though is that the Wii U doesn't really have a killer app like Wii Sports, simply because it was a piece of hardware that was a lot harder to develop for. Hey, editor Deventerous here, just wanted to point out real quick that yeah, the Wii U didn't have anything like Wii Sports that was really innovative and showed what the Wii U could do at its launch, but hey man, I enjoyed Nintendo Land a lot, okay? That game is low-key slept on. It's a gem, and I loved it a lot, okay? That's all I'm saying. Nintendo Land, I don't know, man. It kind of slapped. Since the Wii was so successful, everyone and their mom wanted a piece of the pie, and every third-party developer wanted it in because it was selling like hotcakes. Unfortunately, the irony in this story is that the Wii U basically lacks all of the good choices Nintendo made in developing the Wii. It's also confusing for people since the DS line of consoles were still in full force, so it might have been weird for some people to have two Nintendo consoles that relied on the double screen method, which is exactly what they were trying to avoid with this concept during the development of the Wii. They really should have listened to own advice. The Wii U, in almost every capacity, simply lacked any real identity in comparison to the Wii, or even the GameCube for that matter. At this point, I know what some people might be thinking. Well, Deventerous, it's very obvious that the Wii and the Wii U were designed with different audiences and a different purpose, and that's why Nintendo went in a different direction for the Wii U's design, blah blah blah. Now, that may make sense for a fucking idiot, but if they were intended for different audiences, then why on God's green earth would they name it the Wii U instead of something entirely different and not have to be associated with the Wii at all? Look, as an example, imagine instead of Apple releasing the next iPhone, they go in a new direction and make their new smartphone the F phone or some shit. I don't know. And this new F phone has an entirely different functionality and physical design than the iPhone. If this new product was very clearly meant to serve a different purpose, then it would be clear to everyone that this product is not meant to be associated with the iPhone and is meant for something completely different. Makes sense, right? If the Wii U was intended for the same audience as the Wii, then it makes no sense to change the core aspect of what people like about the Wii and still try to sell it as its new big brother. Also, again, since the Wii U from a design perspective is very difficult to develop for, it makes it hard for third-party developers to make games for the console, hence making the value of the console go down even harder. I mean, it's really no wonder that the Wii U flopped as hard as it did when you just break everything down, to be honest. Now, if the Wii U was successful from the get-go, then there probably would have been a different story, but since it didn't really sell well at all, it didn't really benefit third parties financially enough to develop games for this really weird piece of hardware, you know? It's very sad too, because some developers still held on to hope and helped Nintendo by making more games for the console, but I highly doubt they turned enough of a profit for the effort it took in the first place, minus the companies that helped in making like Smash or Mario Kart. The already bad situation was definitely not helped by the way Nintendo marketed this thing either. If you're a teenager, young adult, or even a full-blown adult and you're looking to play some video games, chances are you're not going to end up buying the game console that has mostly children everywhere plastered in its marketing, right? This is the problem with how they marketed the Wii U. Hey, editor Deventerous back again. And while I was looking through commercials like for the Wii U, I happened to stumble upon this commercial where basically these two kids are trying to convince their parents to buy them like a Wii U for Christmas or something. I don't know, but you can't get any more direct about knowing who your audience is when you make a commercial like that, you know?
We'll make this quick.
Family time's dropping fast, people.
Pew!
Time to upgrade to Wii U.
With Wii U, we can play Super Mario 3D World.
Find secrets with the Wii U gamepad.
And did we mention togetherness?
Just check out the simulation.
Whoa.
I look good.
Look at that.
Yeah, I look like I've been upgraded.
Get the gift of family when you upgrade to Wii U for $299.99. Game rated E for everyone.
The Wii was perfectly marketed in a way that would appeal to basically everyone, and the Wii U essentially did the exact opposite and alienated all those people who bought the Wii despite it being named the Wii U. Since I was a Nintendo shill as a kid, I wasn't gonna buy any console that had Nintendo on it anyways, but I can fully understand why lots of other kids decided to have an Xbox or a PlayStation instead. Despite the launch of the console having a pretty garbage lineup of games, I had quite a bit of playtime on the games it did have because, well, I was very easy to please as a child. Also, yeah, now that we're on the topic, that did not help either. The Wii U basically had no games outside of the big Nintendo games, which alienated even more people than before. I mean, why buy a console that only houses Nintendo games if you're not a fan of any of those games, you know? There's no reason to. At the end of the day, was I happy with my Wii U? Hell yeah, I was. Do I regret having one? Not at all, honestly. The games that it did have were honestly pretty solid for the most part. Yeah, there's some shovelware here and there, but that's to expect with basically every Nintendo console nowadays. Hell, even for as successful as the Switch is, it has its fair share of bad games too. You know, no console is immune to it. The Wii U had some good ideas, it has some good things going for it, but in the end, Nintendo just treated it horribly and made too many mistakes for this console to be successful. Sometimes Nintendo and their aspirations or ambitions to be creative and be the most innovating company in gaming or whatever, in the long run, a lot of the time it ends up backfiring on them super hard, and some ideas just don't pan out the way they want it to, you know? And sometimes, you know, that's kind of what I respect about Nintendo too. Sometimes they just go out of their way to be as left field as possible and just run with their wildest imagination and ideas, and in some cases their experimentation works, and the Switch is the culmination of all their failures with the Wii U. Everything that they did incorrectly with the Wii U, the Switch basically fixed all of those problems. You could potentially argue that the Switch as a piece of hardware may be more advanced than the Wii U, but the difference is that it actually had games on launch like Breath of the Wild, which showed the potential that the console had, and it had its own identity. It was literally named the Nintendo Switch, completely different from the Wii and the Wii U or the GameCube or any of those consoles. Not to mention all those previous ideas that Nintendo initially backed out on, they perfected in execution with the Switch. Despite having a Switch from day one, I don't have many problems with the Switch itself, honestly. For the most part, Nintendo has kind of hit it out of the park, to be honest, outside of Joy-Con drift and online. And as far as I know, the Switch has only been getting more and more successful as time goes on, thanks to games like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which has been a huge game for them, and they've been milking the absolute shit out of it. Pokemon always sells well. Smash is like the biggest fighting game ever, to my knowledge, in terms of sales, and it's a little inspiring in a way, despite all the hiccups, despite all the mistakes, despite the amount of money they lost on the Wii U. In the end, they only came through and provided something even better than basically anyone probably anticipated after the failure of the Wii U. And hey, despite all that stuff, the Wii U still has its value nowadays if you want to pirate games, I guess. And if we want to talk about Nintendo's future as a company for a second, I see no reason for them to just not milk the Switch and just keep making newer and upgraded versions of the console, you know, whenever that happens. Anyways, yeah, that's all I gotta say for now about this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a good day, and yeah, this video is over. Bye.